The forest was not kind to the lonely. Its trees whispered secrets. Its wind carried warnings. And as daylight bled into dusk, Tessa hurried through the cold. 3 months. That was how long she had survived here alone in the wild. Once, she lived surrounded by marble walls, silver mirrors, and servants who never looked her in the eye. Once, she had been promised to a king whose hands were stained with the blood of 3 dead brides. She'd fled under cover of darkness, trading her crown for silence, her life of silk and ceremony for one of dirt, hunger, and fear. Now the forest was her only companion. And though it was merciless, at least it was honest. She knelt beside the river, filling her flask. The water was freezing, biting into her skin. Winter was coming fast. Each day grew shorter, each night more unforgiving. All she wanted was to return to her cabin before the sun vanished. To her fire. Her thin blanket. The safety of 4 walls, no matter how fragile. But then she heard it. A sound beneath the river's roar. So faint she almost thought she imagined it. A whimper. Soft. Broken. Tessa froze. She tilted her head, listening. There it was again, high, frightened, desperate. Her eyes scanned the river. Halfway across the swollen current, a fallen log had snagged between 2 rocks. And on it a small, dark shape. A wolf pup. It was tiny, no bigger than a loaf of bread. Its fur soaked through, clinging to its fragile ribs. It tried to stand, slipped, and nearly plunged into the current. The cry that followed sliced straight through her heart. Tessa's gaze swept the far bank. No mother. No pack. Only the pup, trembling, alone, and moments from being swept away. The sensible choice was clear. Leave it. Go home. She barely had enough food for herself. Winter would be cruel enough without another mouth to feed. But as she turned to leave, the pup lifted its head. And for the briefest heartbeat, their eyes met. Amber. Bright. Alive. Something in that look made her chest ache. The log shifted, rocking in the current. Time was running out. Tessa exhaled a shaky breath. Foolish girl, she muttered to herself, already untying her boots. She set them aside. Then her cloak. Then stepped into the freezing water. The first shock stole her breath. The second burned through her calves like knives of ice. By the third, she couldn't feel her feet at all. The river pushed against her legs, wild and hungry. But she kept going. Stay, she gasped, her teeth chattering. Don't move. Each step was a battle. The current tried to pull her under, the stones beneath her feet slick with moss. Her skirt tangled around her knees, dragging her down. But she refused to stop. The pup whimpered again, too weak to move. Tessa reached out, fingers brushing the slick bark of the log. She grasped it, steadying herself, then whispered, I won't hurt you. I just want to help. The pup froze. Then, as if surrendering, it let her reach for it. It was lighter than she expected, all fur and fear and trembling bone. She gathered it against her chest, its heartbeat frantic against her skin. The return journey felt endless. Her limbs heavy, her body numb. But she pushed through the current until her knees struck the muddy bank. She fell to her hands, gasping, clutching the pup tight. Rain began to fall soft at first, then harder, until it soaked them both. Tessa wrapped her cloak around the tiny creature and whispered, You're safe now. I have a fire waiting. Food. Not much, but enough to share. The pup pressed closer, seeking her warmth. Something in her chest cracked open, a place she had kept sealed since the night she ran from the palace. She walked through the storm, clutching the creature against her heart. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. Lightning split the sky. In that flash of white, the forest seemed to move, shadows shifting in ways that couldn't be wind. Tessa stopped, breath catching. But when the darkness fell again, there was only the sound of rain and the quiet breathing of the small life she carried. By the time she reached her cabin, she could barely lift the latch. She stumbled inside, teeth chattering, and dropped to her knees before the fire. The flames had nearly died, but she coaxed them back to life, feeding them bit by bit until warmth filled the air again. The pup's fur began to dry, revealing a coat of deep black. It blinked up at her with those same amber eyes. "Look at you," she whispered softly. "You'll grow into a terror one day." It yawned, curling tighter against her cloak. And Tessa smiled, a small, genuine smile that felt strange on her lips. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, for the first time since she had run from the king, she felt something that almost resembled peace. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching. From the trees beyond the window, unseen eyes gleamed faint gold in the dark. And as Tessa drifted toward sleep, clutching the tiny creature to her chest, she had no idea that her single act of mercy had already changed the course of her life forever. Because sometimes, kindness awakens things that have been sleeping. Sometimes, mercy invites what destiny has been waiting to deliver. Would you have done what she did? Would you have risked your life for a helpless creature you didn't know? Or walked away to survive another night alone? Tessa didn't know why she jumped into that river. Only that something inside her refused to let that tiny cry go unanswered. And that choice, that one reckless act of compassion, was the beginning of everything. Morning crept slowly into the cabin. Light filtered through the single small window, casting long stripes across the floorboards. Tessa stirred the embers in the hearth with a stick, coaxing them back to life. The familiar crackle of fire filled the silence, the sound of survival. The wolf pup lay curled on her blanket near the fire, its black fur now soft and dry. Those amber eyes watched her closely, alert yet calm. "You're looking better," Tessa murmured, breaking a small smile. Her voice sounded strange after so many days without speech. She reached for the pouch hanging from a nail on the wall. Inside was the last of her dried venison. Precious food. She hesitated, then broke off a piece anyway. "I suppose we both need our strength." The pup's nose twitched. It rose shakily, testing one paw, the injured one, before limping toward her. "Careful," she whispered, holding out the meat. The little creature sniffed her fingers, then took it gently, almost politely. Tessa couldn't help but laugh softly. "You're the first guest I've entertained in months," she said. "My hospitality isn't what it once was." The cabin was simple, rough walls, a patched roof, a single bed of straw and wool. Her father would have fainted to see her living like this. But she preferred the honest dirt of this place to the polished lies of the castle. Her father, Lord Mercer, had called it destiny when the king asked for her hand. But destiny felt more like a death sentence when she learned of the 3 wives before her, each gone within a year, their fates whispered behind closed doors. She'd tried to be dutiful. She'd smiled through dinners and bowed her head when the king's eyes lingered too long. But the night she found blood on the hem of the queen's gown, blood that hadn't belonged to her, she ran. Now, the only blood she saw was her own, staining her hands from hard work. The pup finished eating, licking its paw. Tessa's smile faded. For a moment, everything was still. Too still. The forest outside had fallen silent. No birds. No wind. Even the river's steady murmur had gone quiet. Her heartbeat quickened. She froze, listening. The pup lifted its head. Ears pricked forward. A low, uneasy whine escaped its throat. "What is it?" she whispered. The pup limped toward the door, whimpering again, pressing its nose to the crack. Tessa's pulse thudded in her ears. Had the king's men found her? After 3 months of hiding, had they finally tracked her down? She reached for the iron poker beside the hearth. It was no sword, but it would have to do. Her steps were quiet as she approached the door. She pressed her ear against the wood. Nothing. Not even the creak of branches. Her hand trembled on the latch. Every instinct screamed, "Don't open it. Hide. Wait." But she couldn't bear not knowing. Slowly, she lifted the latch and pulled. The door opened with a long, tired groan. At first, she saw only the trees tall and unmoving beneath the pale morning light. Then she looked down. Her breath caught. Wolves. Dozens of them. Standing in a wide circle around her cabin. Their fur shimmered with shades of gray, gold, and white. Not one moved. Not one growled. They only watched. Their eyes, all of them, glowed the same unnatural amber as the pups. The pup squirmed from her arms, darting through the open doorway. No! Tessa reached out, but it slipped past her. The wolves didn't attack. They parted, creating a path through the clearing. From between the trees, another figure emerged. Larger. Darker. A wolf unlike any she had ever seen. It moved with slow, deliberate grace. Its fur was black as midnight, every muscle rippling beneath its coat. Its eyes, those impossible golden eyes, locked on hers. The world narrowed to that single gaze. Ancient. Intelligent. Not just animal. Something more. The pup yipped, limping toward a smaller gray wolf that nuzzled it affectionately. Its mother. The black wolf lowered its head, not in threat, but in a bow. And then, as if on command, every wolf in the clearing lifted its head and howled. The sound rolled through the forest like thunder, deep, haunting, full of power. Tessa's body shook with it. It wasn't just noise. It was meaning, gratitude, recognition, something older than language. When the last echo faded, the black wolf turned and disappeared into the trees. The others remained, silent and unmoving. Moments later, the great wolf returned, dragging the carcass of a young deer. It carried it to her doorway and dropped it at her feet. Tessa froze. It was an offering. The black wolf stood tall again, eyes never leaving hers. Slowly, cautiously, she knelt. Her hand brushed the deer's warm fur. Still fresh. Still warm. When she looked up again, everything changed. The wolf's body shimmered. Heat rippled in the air like a mirage. Fur receded. Limbs lengthened. Bones shifted with a sound like cracking ice. Before her stood a man. He was tall, taller than any man she had ever seen. Broad shoulders, skin bronzed by sun, muscles carved like stone. Dark hair fell wild around his face. But his eyes were the same as the wolf's. Amber. Ancient. Burning with a knowing that made her heart stop. He took one step toward her. Tessa stumbled back, clutching the doorframe. Her mind screamed impossible, yet her body believed. The man tilted his head, studying her. Not predator. Not prey. Something else. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, darkness swallowed her vision. The world tilted sideways. And the last thing she saw was his face, not angry, not threatening, but curious. As if she were the miracle, not him. When she awoke, it was to the sound of her own heartbeat. Her cheek was pressed against the wooden floor, her blanket twisted around her. The pup lay curled beside her, asleep. The fire had burned low. For a moment, she told herself it had all been a dream. No wolves. No glowing eyes. No man made of shadow and fur. But when she stepped outside, she saw it. The deer carcass, lying before her cabin, its neck marked by the bite of enormous fangs. Blood still glistened in the morning sun. Her knees weakened. Not a dream, then. Somewhere in these woods lived a creature that could shift between beast and man. And it had brought her a gift. A chill crawled down her spine, not of fear, but of knowing. Whatever it was, it had seen her. It had chosen her. And from that moment forward, she would never be invisible again. She looked at the deer and whispered, "What are you really?" But the forest gave no answer. Only the wind, brushing through the trees like a whisper. It's strange, isn't it, how kindness can summon things beyond your understanding. Tessa had saved one small life, and in doing so, had woken something ancient that had been watching all along. Sometimes mercy doesn't just save others. It changes the one who dares to give it. Tessa didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the wind sounded like footsteps outside her cabin. Every flicker of shadow near the window set her heart racing. She sat by the fire until dawn, clutching the iron poker across her knees. The pup slept soundly beside her, unbothered, as though nothing about this world was strange at all. By morning, the snow had started to fall. It came quietly, thin flakes swirling in the pale light. Tessa stood at the window, arms crossed against the chill, and stared out at the trees. She half expected to see those amber eyes again, waiting beyond the clearing. But there was nothing. Only the hush of falling snow. She tried to convince herself it had all been a trick of exhaustion, a fevered dream born of hunger and solitude. But the deer carcass said otherwise. The bite marks were real. The blood was real. And when she closed her eyes, she could still see him, the man, the beast, whatever he was. A man who had looked at her as though she were not a stranger, but something remembered. By midday, she forced herself back into motion. Routine was her anchor. She salted strips of venison, hung herbs to dry, and repaired a crack in the window with pine pitch. It was almost enough to feel normal again. Almost. The pup, she'd begun calling him Asher, followed her everywhere now, limping less with each day. When she chopped wood, he watched. When she stirred the stew, he sat by her feet. Sometimes she caught herself talking to him, her voice soft and wistful. "You'll leave soon, won't you?" she murmured one night as he lay by the fire. "Your kind always does." Asher's ears twitched. He looked up at her, his eyes catching the firelight, that same strange amber glow. Tessa smiled faintly. "You'll find your pack again." But even as she said it, a shadow passed through her, a quiet dread she couldn't name. The next morning came wrapped in silver fog. Tessa prepared to fetch herbs from the ravine beyond the river, where she'd seen fever leaf still growing beneath the snow. She wrapped herself in her cloak, slung her pouch across her shoulder, and whispered to Asher, "Stay. Guard the cabin." The wolf pup tilted his head, whined softly, then lay back down, obedient but uneasy. The forest felt different that day. Too quiet again. Even the crows were silent. Snow crunched under her boots as she made her way toward the ravine. It was slow work. The drifts were deep now, and the air bit at her skin. But the thought of fresh herbs for her dwindling supply kept her moving. She knelt beside a cluster of frost-laced leaves and brushed the snow away with her glove. The scent that rose was sharp and clean. A small victory. Then she heard voices. Men's voices. Tessa froze. Her head turned toward the sound, eyes wide. The voices were faint but unmistakable, deep, rough, carrying the clipped tone of soldiers. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She crouched low, listening. "Tracks lead this way," one said. "Someone's been through here recently." "Could be the girl," another replied. The king's orders were clear, alive if possible. Dead if not. Tessa's breath caught. King's men. They'd found her. Her mind raced. She couldn't go back to the cabin. They'd search it first. She had to run. Now. She ducked behind a fallen log, her heart slamming against her ribs. Through the gaps in the bark, she saw them, 3 men in crimson and gold. The king's crest gleamed on their breastplates. The leader crouched, examining the snow. His hand brushed the earth where her footprints had sunk deep. "Still warm," he muttered. "She's close." Tessa pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Her lungs felt too tight, too small to hold air. The third soldier called out. "Tracks lead that way, sir." The leader nodded. "Spread out." "She's not getting far." Panic took over. Tessa bolted. Snow flew around her as she ran, branches snapping against her cloak. "Over there," someone shouted behind her. "She's running for the river." She didn't look back. Her legs burned, her ankle twisting on the uneven ground. The river, if she could reach it, she could cross where the ice was thick. Maybe lose them in the woods beyond. But her foot struck a hidden hole. Pain shot through her ankle, white and blinding. She fell hard, face first into the snow. Rough hands grabbed her arms before she could rise. "Got her." Tessa struggled, kicking, clawing, but they were stronger. The leader hauled her to her feet, his voice cold and formal. "Lady Tessa of House Mercer," he said. "By order of His Majesty, King Sohun, you are commanded to return to the palace and fulfill your marriage vows." Her blood turned to ice. "No," she gasped. "You don't understand. He'll kill me." "He killed the others." The men exchanged glances. One hesitated, but the leader's grip only tightened. "We have our orders, my lady," he said. "The king wants you alive. For now." "For how long?" she cried. "Until he's done with me? Until I give him an heir to murder like the rest." The leader's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. "Please," Tessa begged. "Have mercy." "Mercy?" He laughed bitterly. "The king has none left. Not for you. Not for anyone." The soldiers began dragging her through the snow. Her ankle throbbed, her body trembling with pain and cold. Then a sound split the air. A low growl. Deep and resonant. Not human. The men froze. From the trees ahead, a shadow stepped into the clearing. Massive. Black as pitch. The wolf. The one from the night before. Its fur shimmered in the pale light, each muscle tense beneath its hide. Its teeth gleamed like silver. The men drew their swords. "Back," the leader shouted. "Stay back, beast." The wolf's eyes glowed gold. It stepped forward once. Twice. Then it lunged. Steel flashed too slow. The wolf struck like lightning, jaws closing around the leader's arm. The crunch of bone echoed through the trees. The man screamed, falling backward. The others attacked, but the beast was too fast, moving with a deadly grace, dodging blades, striking with precision. One soldier fled. Another fell to the snow, unmoving. The leader stumbled away, clutching his shattered arm. "Demon," he gasped. "We'll return with fire and silver." They ran. Tessa fell to her knees, shaking, the breath torn from her lungs. The snow was spattered with blood. The wolf turned toward her, chest heaving, eyes burning with something more than wild instinct. She should have been terrified. But she wasn't. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, she felt safe. "Thank you," she whispered. The wolf's gaze softened. The air shimmered again. The sound of bones shifting filled the clearing. And then, before her, the man stood once more, bare, unflinching, powerful. The same face from her memory. The same golden eyes. He stepped toward her. She should have run. She didn't. When he knelt beside her, his breath misted in the cold. His hand brushed the torn hem of her dress, the injured ankle beneath. His touch was warm, impossibly warm. "Can you understand me?" she whispered. He didn't answer. But his eyes did. Without a word, he lifted her easily into his arms. Her breath caught, startled by his strength, by the closeness of his skin, his heat. "Wait," she gasped. "I can walk." He looked down at her, and though he said nothing, his gaze made it clear. He disagreed. So she said nothing more. As he carried her back through the snow, the forest seemed to hold its breath. And somewhere deep inside her, a truth began to form. This man, this creature, was no random savior. He was part of something larger. And whatever he was, her life was no longer her own. Sometimes, fate doesn't knock at your door. Sometimes, it breaks it open claws first. Tessa didn't know it yet, but the moment that creature carried her from the snow, her story was no longer about survival. It was about destiny. Tessa didn't remember falling asleep. Only the sound of a heartbeat that wasn't her own. Steady. Close. Protective. When her eyes opened again, she was warm. Too warm. The ceiling above her wasn't wood, it was stone, carved with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. She blinked, disoriented. A fire crackled nearby. She was lying on a bed of furs, her ankle bandaged with clean cloth. The scent of pine and smoke filled the air. This wasn't her cabin. This was somewhere deep underground. Her pulse quickened. She pushed herself up, ignoring the pull of pain in her ankle. "Where am I?" she whispered. A voice answered, low, smooth, and too close. "Safe." Tessa turned sharply. He stood in the doorway, the man from the forest. The wolf. He was dressed now, wrapped in a dark cloak that seemed to shimmer like shadow when he moved. His eyes caught the firelight, gold and steady. Tessa's throat tightened. "You brought me here?" He nodded once. "You were hurt." His voice carried the faintest accent, deep and careful, as though human words didn't come easily to him. Tessa tried to find her footing, to mask the tremor in her voice. "I saw you change. I saw what you are." He didn't deny it. "You saved one of mine," he said simply. "I returned the favor." "One of yours," she repeated. "The pup." He nodded again. "His name is Asher. He is my blood." Tessa's heart stumbled over the words. "You mean your child?" The faintest smile touched his lips. "In a way." He stepped closer. The firelight traced the planes of his face, strong, unyielding, yet not cruel. There was something ancient in his expression, as though he carried centuries in the quiet between his words. Tessa swallowed. "Why show yourself to me?" His gaze lingered on her a moment longer before he said, "You earn the truth." He turned toward the fire, his shadow stretching long against the stone wall. "This forest once belonged to my kind," he said. "Before your king. Before your walls and crowns and wars. We lived beneath the moon, bound by oath and blood. But when the king rose, he feared what he could not rule. He hunted us, burned our dens, killed our young." His voice dropped lower, raw with memory. "Those of us who survived went into hiding. The others were not so lucky." Tessa's stomach tightened. The king again. Always the king. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know what he'd done to you." He looked at her then, really looked, and in his eyes she saw not just anger, but grief. "You are not like him," he said softly. "You ran from the blood he spilled." She drew a slow breath, her chest aching with something she couldn't name. "How long have you been watching me?" "Since the river." Her pulse quickened. "You were there that night?" "Yes. I followed you after you saved Asher. You entered our territory. Any other intruder would have been hunted. But you risked your life for one of us." "I didn't know he was one of you," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "That is why it mattered." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Only the fire spoke, crackling softly in the background. Finally, she asked, "What do I call you?" He hesitated, as though the name itself carried weight. "Kale," he said. "That was my name, before the curse." Her eyes lifted. "Curse?" He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Once, my people could walk freely in both forms, wolf and man. We were guardians of balance. But the king's greed broke that bond. He sought our power, tried to bind it to himself through dark magic. When he failed, he cursed us instead. Now we are trapped between worlds, neither beast nor man, and bound to this forest by blood. Tessa's chest tightened. Bound? He nodded. If we leave these woods, we die. She stared into the fire. So much death. So much cruelty from the man she was once meant to marry. Kale's voice softened. The king will not stop hunting you. He believes your blood can break the curse. That is why he wanted you as his queen. Tessa's head snapped up. My blood? Why? Kale's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Because you are the last daughter of the ancient line of mercy. A bloodline born under the same moon as ours. You carry what he tried to steal. She shook her head slowly. No, I'm just human. Kale's lips curved faintly. Perhaps. But your blood knows more truth than you do. The words hung in the air like smoke. Tessa stood, ignoring the pain that shot up her leg. If that's true, then I've doomed you all. He'll come for me again. For us. Kale stepped forward, closing the distance between them. We are not so easily hunted. His voice dropped lower, quiet as a breath. You are safe here, Tessa. For now. Her name in his mouth did strange things to her heart. She looked up at him, at the strength in his stance, the stillness in his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't see a monster. She saw a protector. She whispered, Why do I feel like I've met you before? Kale's eyes softened. Because you have. Tessa frowned. I would remember. Not if memory was taken. Her lips parted, confusion and fear tangling together. What are you saying? Kale stepped closer, until his breath touched her cheek. Once, long ago, you stood beneath the same moon as I did. You made a promise, one that bound your soul to mine. When your king rose to power, he broke it. He had your memories erased, your life rewritten. But the bond never truly died. Her breath hitched. That's impossible. Then why do you dream of the forest before you ever came here? He asked quietly. Why do you wake with tears and not know why? Tessa's knees weakened. I thought those were just nightmares. Kale's voice gentled. Not nightmares. Echoes. He stepped back slightly, giving her space, though his gaze stayed steady. The bond between us will awaken again. It already has. You can feel it. And she could. That strange, magnetic pull between them, the way her chest tightened when he looked at her, the way his voice seemed to reach something deep in her she didn't know existed. Why tell me now? She asked. Because the king's soldiers will return, Kale said. And when they do, you must choose to run again or to fight beside me. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Fight beside you? Against him. Kale nodded. Your fate is tied to this forest. Whether you want it or not. She met his gaze, trembling. And for the first time since she'd fled the palace, she didn't feel powerless. She felt awake. Still, one question haunted her. What happens if I stay? She asked softly. Kale's eyes darkened, full of meanings she couldn't yet read. Then your story, and mine, will finally finish what it began. We all have moments that divide us, when running no longer saves us, and facing what hunts us becomes the only way forward. Tessa didn't know it yet, but her choice would not only determine her fate. It would awaken something powerful enough to change the balance of two worlds. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm that almost felt peaceful. Tessa stayed hidden in Kale's underground refuge, learning the quiet ways of his world. The chambers were vast, carved deep into the mountain's roots, lit by fire and glowing moss. There were rooms lined with old scrolls, maps, and carvings of wolves that seemed to move when the light changed. Asher was never far from her side. He followed her as she explored, his playful growls soft in the echoing tunnels. For the first time since fleeing the palace, she felt safe. And yet, something in Kale's gaze unsettled her. He spoke little, But when he did, every word seemed weighted with things he didn't say. She could feel him watching when she wasn't looking, not with suspicion, but with a strange, silent ache. One evening, she found him standing at the mouth of the cave, staring at the rising moon. Its silver light cut through the fog, painting his features in cold fire. "You never sleep," she said quietly. He didn't turn. "I can't. The moon doesn't let me." She stepped closer. "When you change, does it hurt?" Kale's shoulders tensed. "Yes." Then, after a pause, "But pain reminds us what's real." His tone made her chest ache. She reached out before she could stop herself, her hand brushing his arm. "Warm. Steady. Human. You're real," she whispered. He looked at her then, eyes soft, but burning with something deeper. "So are you." And that's what terrifies him, the king. He can cage flesh, not spirit. She smiled faintly. "I used to think my spirit was weak." Kale shook his head. "No. It was only waiting to remember itself." Something about the way he said it, the quiet conviction, the reverence, made her want to believe him. That night, when the moon climbed higher, Tessa dreamed again. She was standing in a clearing bathed in silver light. The same forest. But this time, she wasn't alone. A woman stood before her, tall, robed in white, her hair silver as frost. Her eyes glowed faint gold. "You made the promise," the woman said softly. "Do not let him forget it." Tessa reached for her. "Who are you?" But the woman only smiled sadly. "You have his mark now. You always did." Before Tessa could speak, the forest around her burned. Flames roared through the trees, and a voice cruel, familiar echoed through the smoke. "You cannot hide from me, child." The king's voice. She woke with a cry. Kale was there instantly, kneeling beside her bed. His hands gripped her shoulders, steady but gentle. "Tessa, what happened?" She gasped for air, her heart pounding. "I saw her. A woman. She spoke of a promise." Then the king. Kale's expression darkened. "The Moon Mother speaks to few. You were chosen once, before memory was taken." "What promise?" she demanded. "Why can't I remember?" Kale looked away. "Because remembering would bind us completely. And that would destroy you." "Destroy me?" Her voice shook. "How could the truth destroy me?" "Because your blood carries power meant for both our worlds," he said. "If you awaken it before you are ready, it could tear you apart." Tessa stared at him, disbelief and fear twisting together. "You knew this? You knew all along." He didn't answer. "You said you brought me here to protect me," she whispered. Was that the truth or another kind of cage? Kale's jaw tightened. Protection can feel like a cage when you don't know what hunts you. Her voice hardened. "Then tell me." His silence said more than words ever could. She turned from him, pain burning behind her eyes. She had trusted him, and he was keeping secrets, just like the king had. Later that night, unable to rest, Tessa wandered deeper into the tunnels. The air grew colder as she descended. She carried a torch Kale had left burning by the wall, its light flickering across the carvings. That's when she saw it, an ancient stone door at the corridor's end, half covered in vines. Symbols carved into its surface glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. She hesitated, then pressed her hand to the stone. The markings flared brighter. The door opened on its own, groaning as if it had slept for centuries. The chamber beyond shimmered with silver light. At its center stood a pool of still water, glowing faintly under the moonlight that somehow reached this far below the earth. And carved into the floor beside it, a sigil. 2 wolves intertwined. One gold, one black, bound by a circle of flame. Tessa knelt, tracing the design with her fingers. Her breath hitched. The same mark was on her wrist. She had thought it was a birthmark her whole life, a simple crescent scar. But now she saw it clearly for what it was. A symbol. A bond. Footsteps echoed behind her. Kale. His voice was sharp with alarm. Tessa, don't touch that. She spun to face him. You should have told me, she cried. This mark, this bond, it's mine, isn't it? It ties me to you. He stopped short, his expression torn between anger and sorrow. It ties us both, he said quietly. But it wasn't supposed to awaken yet. Why? What are you afraid of? Kale's voice dropped low. Because if it awakens before the moon's rise, the curse will shift. It won't just bind us, it will bind you to my fate. Tessa shook her head. I don't care about your curse. I deserve to know what I am. You're not ready. Then make me ready, she shouted. The sound echoed through the chamber, the air trembling. The pool beside them began to glow brighter. The mark on her wrist burned. Tessa, stop, Kale reached for her, but it was too late. Light exploded between them. The ground trembled. A voice deep, ancient, neither male nor female, filled the air. The promise is reforged. The sigil on the floor blazed white. The pool rippled, swirling into darkness. Images flashed in her mind: fire, wolves, the king's face twisted in fury, and Kale, standing beside her in chains of gold. Then silence. When the light faded, Tessa collapsed. Kale caught her before she hit the floor. Her pulse was weak, her breath shallow. Her skin shimmered faintly with moonlight. He whispered her name, desperate. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his. What have I done? She whispered. Kale's expression broke. You've woken the bond. And now he will know where to find you. Her heart dropped. The king. Kale nodded grimly. He'll come for you by the next full moon. The truth hit like a blade. Her blood was no longer hidden. The bond had lit a beacon for her enemy. And worse, her fate was now tied to Kale's. If he died, she would die too. Tessa's world had changed again, but this time, it was by her own hand. Sometimes the truth is not freedom. Sometimes, it's a door you can never close again. Tessa had begged for answers. Now she had them. And they came with a price she never meant to pay. The cave had gone cold. The fire, once warm and alive, had burned down to dull embers. Tessa sat beside it, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the mark on her wrist, the one that now pulsed faintly with light, beating in time with her heart. It was strange how quickly fear could drain the strength from someone. Hours ago, she had felt powerful, almost unbreakable. Now, she felt hollow. Kale paced across the chamber, his movements restless and sharp. Every so often, he glanced toward the entrance, as though expecting someone or something to appear. Tessa's voice was quiet when she finally spoke. You said the king would come by the next full moon. Kale stopped, his back to her. Yes. How long? 3 nights. The words hit her like a physical blow. 3 nights until the man who had ruined everything found her again. Her fingers trembled as she traced the glowing mark on her wrist. Can you break it? The bond? Kale turned, eyes dark and tired. If I could, I would have long ago. So I'm just tied to you? Bound to die if you do. His jaw tightened. Yes. She laughed, a dry, hollow sound. Then I've escaped one cage only to find another. Kale's voice hardened. You think I wanted this? Tessa met his gaze, anger flickering behind her tears. You should have told me. He took a step forward, his voice low. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? She snapped. You hid the truth from me. You let me believe I had a choice when I didn't. Kale's expression darkened, and for a heartbeat, the beast within him stirred behind his eyes. You would not have stayed if I told you what was coming, he said quietly. And if you ran again, he would have found you sooner. Tessa stood, her voice trembling but fierce. I had the right to know. To choose what happens to my own life. Kale stepped back, guilt flickering across his face. I know. Silence stretched. The only sound was the faint crackle of dying flames. Finally, Kale said softly, "You think I wanted to be bound to a mortal? To feel your heartbeat in my chest? To know that if you die, my curse ends, but my soul burns with it." His voice broke on the last word, quiet and raw. This bond was never meant to be mercy. It was meant to punish. Tessa's anger faltered. She had never heard him sound so human. "I didn't ask for this either," she whispered. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his gaze softened. "I know." For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension in the air hung heavy, sorrow and longing tangled together like threads of the same knot. Finally, Kale turned away, walking toward the far tunnel. "I will prepare the wards. If the king sends scouts, they'll find nothing but fog." When he was gone, Tessa sank back down beside the fire. Her hands shook as she held them toward the fading warmth. Her thoughts spun like storm clouds. She had wanted freedom. Instead, she had found destiny. And now that destiny would destroy her. Asher padded toward her quietly, curling at her feet. She stroked his fur absently, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't know what to do, little one," she whispered. "I don't know how to fight a curse. I don't even know who I am anymore." The pup whined softly, resting his head on her knee. Tessa stared into the fire. It was dying fast, just like her hope. She didn't notice the moment she drifted into sleep. But when she did, the dreams returned. This time, she stood in a grand hall lit by torches. The air smelled of roses and blood. At the far end of the room sat the king. His eyes gleamed beneath the golden crown. The smile that curved his lips was the same one that had haunted her for months. Charming, cold, cruel. "You've run far, my bride," he said. "But did you really think you could hide from me?" She tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. Chains coiled around her wrists, made not of metal, but of light. They burned her skin. "Your blood belongs to me," he said. "With it, I will end their kind and take what should have been mine." Then the light around her wrist flared. Her mark burned like fire. She screamed. "Tessa!" Her eyes flew open. Kale was shaking her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "You were screaming," he said. "Your pulse, it was fading." She gasped for breath, heart racing. "It was him," she whispered. "He's close. He can see me through the bond." Kale's expression hardened. "Then the wards are failing." He rose to his feet, pacing like a caged animal. Tessa pushed herself up, trembling. "What does that mean?" "It means he's using your blood as a thread to follow us," Kale said. "And when the moon rises again, he'll find this place." She swallowed. "What can we do?" Kale turned toward her, his eyes fierce. "You can leave." "What?" He stepped closer. "There is one path still open north, through the frozen pass. If you cross before dawn, the curse's boundary may not kill you." "And you?" "I'll stay," he said simply. "I'll hold him off." Tessa's voice broke. "If you die, I die." "I'll make sure it happens fast," Kale said, too calmly. "No," she shook her head violently. "You're not doing this." "I have no choice." "You always have a choice," she said, tears streaking her face. "Even cursed men do." Kale's gaze softened. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. For the first time, she didn't flinch. "You're stronger than you know," he whispered. "Your blood isn't a curse, Tessa. It's a gift. And it's the only thing that can save us." Her heart pounded. "How?" He hesitated. "There's an old prophecy, one that speaks of the union between light and shadow. It says only the one who carries mercy in her blood can break the binding of the wolf's moon." Tessa stared at him. "You mean me?" Kale nodded. "But prophecy demands sacrifice." Her breath caught. "What kind of sacrifice?" "The kind you're not ready to give," he said quietly. And with that, he turned and left her alone in the dim firelight. Tessa pressed her hands to her face, her tears falling fast. Every road before her led to pain. Every choice demanded something she wasn't sure she could give. She looked down at Asher, sleeping peacefully by her feet. She thought of Kale, fierce, haunted, broken, willing to die to save her. And then she thought of the king's voice echoing through her dreams. The future pressed in around her like the weight of the earth. Too heavy to fight. Too dark to see through. For the first time since she had run from the palace, Tessa whispered the words she had sworn never to speak again. "I'm afraid." And in the silence that followed, her own voice was the only one that answered. When hope begins to fade, it's easy to believe the darkness has already won. But sometimes, the night only grows deepest just before the dawn. Tessa didn't know it yet. But the storm that was coming would break more than curses. It would decide the fate of both worlds. The night passed in silence. No wind. No wolves. Just the soft rhythm of Tessa's breathing and the faint pulse of the mark on her wrist. But something inside her had changed. The fear was still there, cold and sharp, yet beneath it was something steadier. A quiet fire she hadn't felt in years. She rose before dawn, wrapping herself in Kale's cloak where he'd left it draped across a stone chair. It was heavy, warm, and smelled faintly of pine and smoke. Asher stirred beside the dying fire, his small body stretching in a lazy arc. When she whispered his name, his ears perked up instantly. "Stay here," she said softly. "Keep the fire going." The pup whined once, low and uncertain, as if he sensed what she meant to do. But she smiled at him, brushing his head. "Don't worry. I'm coming back." She didn't entirely believe it, but saying it made her feel braver. The tunnels were dark and endless. Her torch cast long shadows across the carved walls, the ancient symbols glowing faintly as she passed. Somewhere deep inside her, she could feel the forest above, the heartbeat of the land thrumming faintly through stone. When she reached the main chamber, Kale was already there. He stood before the moonlit pool, bare-chested, his cloak lying folded beside him. The light from the glowing water painted his skin in silver and gold. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You should be resting." "So should you," she said quietly. "Instead, you're preparing to die." He frowned. "You know I can't let him find you. And you know I can't let you face him alone." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kale sighed, rubbing a hand across his jaw. "You don't understand what he is, Tessa. He doesn't bleed like men do. He carries magic older than I am, darker than this curse. Then we face him together." "Tessa." "No," she said, her voice steady now. "Listen to me. You've spent years carrying this curse like it's punishment. But what if it isn't? What if it's protection? What if your bond to me isn't a chain, it's a key?" Kale blinked, caught off guard by her words. "A key to what?" "To breaking the curse," she said. "To ending this, not by running, not by dying, but by fighting back." His silence was long, thoughtful. The firelight flickered between them, painting his eyes with gold. "You don't even know what you're asking," he said finally. "Then tell me." He hesitated. "There is one way to sever the king's hold. One way to use the bond against him. But it requires power from both sides, light and shadow joined under the blood moon." Her heart skipped. "When?" "Tomorrow night," he said. "When the moon turns red." "Then that's what we'll do," she said. Kale stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "You would risk your life for this?" Tessa nodded slowly. "For both of us." He exhaled, the sound heavy and uncertain. "I should stop you. But you won't." "No," he admitted softly. "I won't." She smiled faintly. "Then it's settled." Kale stared at her for a long time, as if memorizing her face. Then he turned toward the fire, his voice low. "If we fail, the bond will shatter. It will kill us both." "Then we don't fail," she said simply. He looked back at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something like hope in his eyes. That day, they prepared together. Kale gathered rare herbs and ground them into powder. Tessa mixed them with river water and ash, tracing runes across the stone floor of the chamber. He watched her quietly. "You've done this before," he said. She looked up. "I don't remember. But my hands do." When the mark on her wrist glowed brighter, Kale nodded slowly. "The Moon Mother hasn't forgotten you. Then maybe she hasn't given up on us either." By dusk, the chamber was ready. Candles lined the walls, their flames flickering like tiny stars. The air thrummed with energy, sharp, electric, waiting. Tessa stood before the pool, the mark on her wrist pulsing faster now. Kale joined her, his expression grave. "When the blood moon rises," he said quietly, "our souls will merge. For a moment, we will be one. If either of us falters, if fear takes hold, the ritual will break. And he will find us instantly." Tessa's throat tightened. "I won't falter." He studied her face. "Then I'll trust you." Asher whimpered from the edge of the chamber, watching them with wide eyes. Tessa smiled softly. "Stay close, little one. If this works, you'll be free too." The pup tilted his head, his ears twitching as if he understood. When night finally fell, the first light of the blood moon poured through the cracks in the stone ceiling. It painted the water crimson. The sigil on the floor flared to life. Tessa took a step forward, then another, until she stood at the edge of the pool. Kale followed, his hand brushing hers. The touch sent a spark racing up her arm. Every beat of her heart echoed through him, and his through her. It was dizzying. Overwhelming. Alive. "Tessa," he said softly. "Yes. If this is the last thing I ever do, I want you to know." "Don't," she whispered, smiling faintly. "We're not dying tonight." His lips curved into the smallest, rarest smile. "Then let's begin." They stepped into the pool together. The water rose around them warm, glowing, alive. The mark on Tessa's wrist burned brighter, connecting to the matching scar on Kale's chest. Light arced between them, swirling in patterns like living flame. The chamber shook. Stone cracked. Above them, the moon's red light blazed brighter, filling the air with power. And for the first time since she had fled the castle, Tessa didn't feel small. She didn't feel weak. She felt infinite. Her eyes met Kale's, and the bond between them deepened until she could feel everything: his rage, his sorrow, his centuries of guilt. And beneath it all, his love. Not spoken, not confessed, but there, steady and unyielding, like the heartbeat that tied them together. "I see you," she whispered. "And I choose you." The words echoed through the chamber, carried by power older than the curse itself. Kale's eyes widened, not with fear, but awe. The mark on their skin flared white. The water erupted in light. And for one impossible moment, everything: the cave, the forest, even the sky above, seemed to hold its breath. The bond no longer felt like chains. It felt like wings. When the light dimmed, Tessa collapsed against Kale's chest, trembling. He caught her easily, his hand resting over her heart. "It's begun," he said quietly. "The curse is shifting." Her pulse fluttered beneath his hand. "What now?" He looked toward the tunnel entrance, his voice low and certain. "Now he comes." Tessa's hand tightened in his cloak. "Then let him." Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, a choice made in the heart long before the battle begins. Tessa had found hers. And in doing so, she had done what no one else dared. She'd turned her fear into fire. The first sound was thunder. It rolled through the mountain like the growl of something ancient waking from sleep. Then came the wind, violent, howling, alive with magic. Kale lifted his head. "He's here." Tessa turned toward the tunnel. A cold wind rushed through, carrying the scent of iron and smoke. and beneath it, the faint chime of armor. The king's soldiers were coming. Cale's eyes burned gold. He stepped between Tessa and the tunnel's mouth, his body tense, his voice calm. "Stay behind me. No matter what you see, do not break the circle." Tessa nodded. Her heart raced, but her hands were steady. She had made her choice. She would not run again. The ground trembled. Then, from the shadows, they emerged. Dozens of men, clad in crimson and black. Their torches flared like fire against the stone. And at their center walked the king. He hadn't changed. Not truly. His face was still sharp, elegant, too perfect to belong to mercy. But his eyes, they glowed faintly, unnaturally, the mark of a man who had touched forbidden power and survived it. When he saw her, he smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was hunger. "My runaway bride," he said softly. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me." Tessa straightened, chin high. "You tried to kill me." "I tried to make you immortal," the king said, stepping closer. "But you ran, and now you lie in the arms of a monster." Cale's growl rumbled through the chamber. "Careful, human." The king's gaze flicked toward him, unbothered. "Oh, I remember you," he said. "The half-beast who thought himself a savior. I ended your pack once. I can do it again." Cale's teeth bared. "Try." The king raised his hand, and the air rippled. Magic, old and foul, twisted through the cavern. The soldiers' torches flickered blue. The walls groaned as though the mountain itself recoiled. Tessa's breath caught. She could feel it, the pull of the bond between her and Cale tightening, vibrating with energy. The king's power was reaching for it, trying to tear it apart. Cale staggered, clutching his chest. The mark on his skin flared bright. "Cale." He gritted his teeth. "Stay in the circle." The king's voice echoed, smooth and cold. "You were never meant to share that bond, girl. That power belongs to me." "No," Tessa said, her voice shaking but strong. "It belongs to us." She raised her arm, and the mark on her wrist blazed white-hot. Light shot through the chamber, colliding with the king's magic. The air exploded, heat, sound, wind, swirling into chaos. The soldiers fell back, shouting, shielding their faces. Cale caught her before she stumbled, his hand covering hers. Their bond ignited. White light spiraled from them both, spreading like fire through the chamber. Cale's voice was rough, urgent. "Focus on me, Tessa. Feel it. Breathe it." She did. And for the first time, she felt the bond not as pain, but as power. Their hearts beat together. Their breaths synced. And from that connection, strength poured out like a flood. The light struck the king full force, throwing him back. His crown clattered across the stone. His cloak caught fire. Still, he laughed, a sound that chilled the blood. "You can't kill me, girl. Your mercy makes you weak." Tessa's eyes burned with tears and fury. "You're wrong. Mercy isn't weakness." She stepped forward, voice rising with every word. "It's what makes us human. It's what makes us stronger than you'll ever be." The king raised his hand again, but this time, Cale was faster. He lunged, shifting mid-leap. The air filled with black fur and golden light as he struck, his claws tearing through the king's chest. The sound was deafening. Magic screamed. The king's cry echoed through the mountain, a sound of rage, then disbelief, then silence. When Cale stepped back, the king staggered. His hands clutched at the wound, glowing with silver light. He looked at Tessa one last time, his voice fading. "You were never meant to be free." Then he fell. The light in his eyes flickered out. His body crumbled, not to flesh and blood, but to ash. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the mountain shuddered. The sigil beneath them flared gold. The water in the pool rose, swirling around their feet. Tessa gasped. "The curse, it's breaking." Cale looked at her, his form flickering between man and wolf, caught between worlds. His voice was a whisper. Tessa, if the curse lifts, I may not survive it. Her heart clenched. No, you will. He smiled faintly. You forget, I was born of the curse. You were born to end it. Tessa's hands trembled as she cupped his face. Tears streamed down her cheeks. You're not ending. You're becoming. The light rose higher, wrapping around them both. Cale closed his eyes, his voice soft against the storm. You were the promise, Tessa. The one I waited for. She leaned in, her forehead against his. Then don't stop waiting. The world exploded in light. The mountain roared. Flames of gold and white surged through the air, tearing through the last chains of the curse. The wolves outside howled, their voices joining in one earth-shaking cry. And then silence. When the light faded, the cave was still. The pool had turned clear as glass. The sigil was gone. Tessa opened her eyes slowly, her breath catching in her throat. Cale was gone. Only the cloak he had left behind remained dark, soft, resting where he had stood. Her knees gave out. She fell to the floor, clutching it to her chest. Tears fell freely, silent and relentless. Asher whimpered beside her, pressing close. The mountain was quiet again. The storm outside had passed. And though the curse was broken, the cost had carved itself into her heart. She lifted her gaze toward the cracks in the ceiling, where a single beam of moonlight still shone. It touched her skin, warm and gentle. The mark on her wrist glowed faintly, no longer binding, but living. He was gone. But somehow, she could still feel him. Sometimes victory doesn't feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like loss, quiet, aching, but true. Tessa had saved the forest. She had broken the curse. And yet, a piece of her had been left behind in the light that saved them both. Dawn came softly. Not with thunder. Not with fire. But with a silence that felt sacred. The air was clear, crisp, and alive with birdsong. It was the first time in years the forest had sung. Tessa stepped out from the cavern's mouth, her body weak, her heart heavy. The mountain behind her was quiet, the ancient curse broken. The snow had begun to melt. Water trickled down the rocks in silver ribbons, catching the morning light. Asher trotted beside her, his black fur glistening, his limp finally gone. He looked up at her and barked once, sharp, eager, almost joyful. She smiled through her tears. Yes, I know. We made it. Her voice cracked on the last word. She looked back once more, toward the cave that had been both her prison and her sanctuary. The place where she'd lost everything and found herself again. She whispered softly, "Goodbye, Cale." The trees stirred, though there was no wind. A single beam of sunlight slipped through the branches, warm against her cheek. And in that warmth, she felt it, the faint echo of a heartbeat. Steady. Familiar. Not gone. Just changed. She smiled faintly, whispering, "I can still feel you." She turned toward the path that led deeper into the forest. There was no road now, only wild earth. But she walked it anyway, barefoot, each step lighter than the last. Days passed. Tessa built a new cabin by the river, smaller than the one before, but stronger, warmer, full of light. She traded silence for the company of wolves, who came to the clearing each evening and sat near her fire, their eyes calm, their heads bowed. She had become something between human and legend. The forest's protector. The one who broke the moon's curse. The people from the nearby villages began whispering about her. The Lady of the Wolves. The Keeper of the Moonlight. Some said she was a witch. Others said she was a spirit who took pity on the lost. But Tessa didn't care for names. She only cared for peace. Each morning, she gathered herbs by the water, humming to herself. Each evening, she looked toward the horizon, waiting for the sunset to bleed into the trees. And every night, when the moon rose high and silver, she could feel him. Not as flesh and bone, not as shadow and fur, but as presence, as warmth in the air, as the gentle heartbeat that had once echoed beside her own. The mark on her wrist still glowed faintly, but now it pulsed with comfort, not pain. Sometimes, when the moonlight hit it just right, she swore she saw him standing at the forest's edge, watching, silent, smiling. She never ran toward the vision. She didn't have to. She knew he wasn't gone. He was in the trees, in the wind, in the light that touched her face each dawn, and in the small, quiet moments when she felt the world exhale. She could almost hear his voice. "You were the promise, Tessa. The one who made me remember what it meant to be alive." One night, many months later, Tessa sat by the fire with Asher grown large beside her. His fur was thick and glossy, his eyes gold like Kale's. He rested his head on her lap as she spoke softly to him. "You know," she said, stroking his fur, "I used to think mercy was weakness. That it was what let people like the king destroy everything they touched." She paused, gazing into the flames. "But mercy is what saved me. It saved you. It saved him." The pup, not so little anymore, wagged his tail once, slow and content. Tessa smiled. "Funny, isn't it? How everything I ran from led me right back to where I was meant to be." The wind outside shifted, rustling the leaves like a sigh. The fire crackled softly. The air felt warm, alive, and whole. And for the first time, she truly believed it, that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering without breaking. She tilted her head toward the window, where the moon hung full and bright. A streak of light fell across her face. The mark on her wrist glowed in answer. She whispered, "I kept my promise." For a heartbeat, the flames flickered higher, and in their dance, she thought she saw him again. Tall, strong, smiling that quiet, knowing smile. Not sorrowful, not haunting. At peace. Tessa closed her eyes, letting the moment linger. The world was no longer cruel. It was vast and wild and waiting. Years later, travelers who wandered into the deep forest told stories of a woman who lived by the river. They said her cabin was always warm, her door always open to the lost. Some swore they saw wolves at her side, golden-eyed and silent. Others said they heard two voices singing softly in the night, one human, one not. They called her the keeper of the promise. And though no one ever found her grave, they said that on nights when the moon turned red, a figure of light and shadow could be seen standing in the clearing. A woman and a man side by side, their hands entwined, their eyes reflecting the stars. The forest never forgot her. Nor did the wind. Nor did he. Because love, real love, doesn't end with a heartbeat. It endures. It transforms. It becomes part of the world it saves. So, if you ever wander far enough into the woods, and you hear the soft howl of a wolf that sounds almost like a name, listen closely. It might be a story calling you home. Mercy, love, courage. They all begin the same way, with one impossible choice. Tessa chose mercy. And the world chose her back. And maybe that's the lesson we all forget until it's too late. That the smallest act of compassion can awaken the wildest kind of magic. Would you have made the same choice she did? Would you have saved the helpless, even knowing it could cost you everything? Tell me what you think. Because sometimes, the stories we tell reveal the kind of heart we carry.